So earlier we also learned about variables. A variable allows us to store a value of any type in memory. We'll learn more about the different types today. Let's talk a little bit about variable naming. So variables must start with a lowercase letter, for example a or my variable, or at the end my underscore variable. These are all okay. These, however, are not. You must not have a variable that is all capital letters, and you must not start a variable with a capital letter. Ruby is very case sensitive, and these variable names have a different meaning in Ruby, which we'll learn about later. Variable names can also contain numbers, so long as that number is not the first letter. So this is okay. This is not. Note that I've got a 1 at the beginning of the variable. If you were to try this in your text editor, you'd find you get an error. Underscores are okay anywhere in the variable name, but dashes are not allowed. So these are okay. Note I can even have just the underscore on its own, and that is a valid variable name. This, however, is not. Note that I have the dash inside the variable name. Rubyists tend to use snake case style variable names, that is all lowercase and with an underscore in the middle, instead of camel case, which if you've used other languages before or come across other languages, you might be familiar with the camel case style of variable naming. There's no strict adherence required in Ruby to use camel case, apart from the fact that variable names can't start with a capital, but Rubyists tend to prefer using snake case. So in other words, you would use last underscore name instead of last capital N name. There are only 3 difficult problems in computer science: naming things and off by 1 errors. Okay, lame joke aside, how do we name our variables? Naming variables is extremely important. Our prime goal is to make our code readable by somebody else. Variables should make sense in the context of the program, especially to someone who is not you. Which is a better variable name here, n or name? What about here, CTR or counter? What about here, person underscore details or person, last name, first name, address and postcode? Let's have a look at the one by one. So in the first example, I would say that name is a preferable variable name. It's because n could really mean anything. Name is quite specific, it has context, and it should have meaning to most people. In the second example, CTR or counter, well, that was actually a trick question. CTR or counter are both perfectly reasonable. You might have a preference for one or the other depending on the kinds of programs you're writing. And in the last example, while the second variable name is more verbose, it's clunky. And there's so much to read, it can become kind of overwhelming for a programmer. So I would suggest person underscore details is a preferable variable name in this example. In Ruby, we also have the idea of a literal. So a literal is literally a string, or in some cases a number, or as we'll learn later, an object. So here, a literal is a string inside quotes. A variable is something that can be changed.